One of the key forces driving early urbanization was the ability of cities to shrink the vast world, creating hubs where distant cultures and economies could interact. From today's perspective of globalization, an intriguing question arises. How effective were these early urban networks in catalyzing global changes? And does the Danish town of Ribe stand as a prime example of such a network? Let's find out. The Vikings, with their remarkable ships capable of crossing the North Atlantic and navigating major European rivers, made long-distance exploration, stealthy raids, and extensive trade possible. During the Iron Age, trade expanded across Europe with goods such as codfish, glass beads, stair-tight vessels, amber, whetstones, walrus ivory, furs, polar bear skins, and slaves. The Viking period brought significant changes to the trade system, particularly with the emergence of so-called emporia, large centralized marketplaces that spread northward and across the Baltic region to sites like Hedeby, Kaupang, Birka, and Ribe. Written records about Viking Age Ribe are sparse. The first mention of Ribe appears in the Frankish annals from the 850s, when the Danish king Horik granted the missionary Ansgar from the episcopal residence in Hamburg land to build a church and permission for a priest to reside permanently. Bishop Leoftak of Ribe is noted as a participant at the synod in Ingelheim in 948. Ribe is also referred to as an episcopal residence in 965 and 988. Finally, in Adam of Bremen's Gesta from the 1070s, Ribe is described as surrounded by a river streaming in from the ocean and through which the ships steered towards Friesland, or at any rate England and Saxony. The first archaeological attempts to locate ancient Ribe took place in the 1950s, near the present cathedral on the southwest bank of the Ribe River. However, the layers there date back only to the late 11th century. In the 1960s, archaeologists expanded their search to areas outside of the town, including Denkirke and Oakholm, 68 kilometers southwest of Ribe. A significant breakthrough in Ribe's archaeological exploration occurred in the 70s with the extensive excavations on the northeast bank of the river, where remains of the marketplace and an inhumation grave from the 8th century were discovered. Thus, the oldest part of Ribe lies on the north and east banks of the river, while by the end of the 11th century the town centre had shifted to the southwest bank. The landscape northeast of the river is dry and sandy, whereas the southwest side is fragmented into small sandy islets separated by meadow and bogland. The marketplace was established on natural sandbank, several hundred years old. The exact course of the river between the 8th and 12th centuries remains uncertain. The archaeological layers, comprising workshop floors, fireplaces, waste deposits, contain tens of thousands of objects, revealing a thriving craft production, including bead making, bronze casting, amber polishing, comb manufacturing, shoemaking, and pottery, alongside evidence of extensive import and trade activities. Raw materials for craftsmen, and finished goods like Frankish ceramics and hollow glass, volcanic basalt, Scandinavian soapstone, slate whetstones, whale bones, and glass beads from the Middle East. The oldest cultural layers in Ribe, dating back to the period between 704 and 710, reveal evidence of marketplace activity. Early on, the marketplace was organized into plots approximately 6 to 8 meters wide and likely 20 to 30 meters long, arranged perpendicular to the river. There were likely around 40 to 50 plots in total, separated by shallow ditches, some of which were lined with wattle-work. This basic layout remained largely unchanged for about 150 years, with only minor adjustments to the plot boundaries. Until around 770, the marketplace was likely only in use seasonally, as there were no permanent housing structures, only a few pit houses, wells, and what might have been temporary shelters. However, by around 770 to 780, there is evidence of more permanent buildings on these plots, suggesting that the marketplace was in use year-round. Although the excavations have yet to reveal the exact shape and size of these houses, they were likely similar to structures found in contemporary Scandinavian marketplaces. Later excavations uncover traces of buildings from the High Middle Ages, so from the 12th to 13th centuries, in the form of post holes, pits, and other features. Beyond the marketplace plots, excavations have revealed signs of settlements, including pit houses, post-built houses, fences, and road systems. The settlement layers, though not as well documented as those in the marketplace area, show that craft production and trade activity extended beyond the workshop plots. Despite the scarcity of written sources about Ribe from the 10th and 11th centuries, archaeological evidence suggests that the town either disappeared or significantly diminished during these centuries. About 47 graves dating from the 8th to the 11th century have been investigated in an area to the east and north of the settlement. The majority of these graves, about 33, date to the 8th and 9th centuries and are mostly poorly equipped cremation graves with few or no burial gifts. Exceptions include 2 inhumation graves of children and a few graves containing items such as glass beads, iron objects, and in one case a Frankish sword mount of gilded silver. Since the first excavations at the marketplace, 204 chiatas have been found scattered across the site. That's early medieval coins, likely dropped during trade. These coins could have been minted in Ribe or the Frisian area before around 755. Today, Ribe remains one of the most archaeologically rich sites in Denmark for the period leading up to the Viking Age, with its well-preserved and detailed stratigraphy serving as a key reference point for understanding material culture in Northern Europe between 700 and 850. The Northern Emporium project is currently conducting extensive excavations in Ribe, focusing on a typical streetscape in the marketplace area. This research employs new fieldwork methods to gain a high-definition understanding of the social character and development of the site during the 8th and 9th centuries. The project also integrates geoarchaeological and other scientific methods to contextualize finds using 3D laser scanning to create detailed digital records of the surfaces uncovered. For more information, it's worth following the work of Søren Sindbæk, who is heavily involved in this research. The goal of these efforts is not merely to enhance the general record of an unusual site, but specifically to generate new insights into the dynamics, drivers, processes, and agents of early urbanization in Scandinavia. Archaeology aims to uncover the role of communication and material flows in shaping Ribe's urban identity in a region that was otherwise largely non-urban. From its foundation in the early 700s, Ribe's network stood out, with a compact, high-density settlement as a strategically located river port, a series of workshops engaged in advanced production using rare materials such as glass, amber, and high-quality iron. For the first time in Scandinavia, coins were introduced as a regular means of exchange, and bulk commodities like barrels of wine, wheel-thrown pottery, glass vessels, and quarried quernstones began arriving from Germany. What makes their arrival particularly noteworthy is that they enter a region that, especially during the 7th century, appeared to be on the margins of North Sea trade. The factors or individuals responsible for the early growth of this emporium remain a subject of debate. It is, however, clear that Ribe's urban network found a stable foothold. Throughout the 8th century, an increasing variety of material, including large quantities of non-ferrous materials and items like whetstones and reindeer antler used for comb making, began to flow into Ribe, indicating early contact with Norway. The most fascinating additions, however, were the objects that started arriving from the Middle East and beyond. During the 8th century, evidence of glassworking debris indicates a prolific local production of beads. They were crafted individually, sometimes with remarkable skill, from recycled Roman glass, which must have reached Ribe through its general trade connections with Western Europe. But by the end of the century, a new influx emerged, marked by hundreds of non-local beads from a distant source. These included segmented metal foil beads and other drawn tubular beads, types of beads produced in large quantities using semi-industrial techniques. The origin of these beads is generally traced to the Middle East, though some might have been made even further afield. By around 800, the importation of beads had grown so significantly that local glass bead production largely ceased. Along with these beads, another significant testament to new far-reaching connections was a small hoard of 4 to 7 Islamic coins, all corroded together into a single block of metal. The two outer surfaces displayed identical imitations of an Umayyad dirham, likely minted on the fringes of the Caliphate. Dated to around 780 to 790, this coin is the oldest reliably dated example of Islamic silver found in Scandinavia. The emergence of new material connections with the Islamic world in the late 8th century appears to be consistent in the finds from Ribe. But what conclusions can we draw from these discoveries? Well, on one hand, they might simply reflect expanding ambitions and shifting political orientations, especially as the most apparent change in Ribe, its transition from a market site to a town, could indicate a greater involvement by the Danish king. Beads of similar types have been found in Eastern Europe and seem to have reached other sites around the Baltic Sea at about the same time. This shift in Ribe could be seen as an adaptation to a new regional pattern involving materials that ultimately came from the Middle East, but were so indirectly sourced that they scarcely carried any economic or cultural influence from their place of origin. On the other hand, the arrival of coins and beads from the Islamic world might signify the emergence of a new pattern of cultural and economic connectivity, an arc of trade stretching from the Middle East through Russia to the West. This trade could be viewed as linking the economic development of the Carolingian Western Europe with the Caliphate and as contributing significantly to the rise of a maritime long-distance venture in Scandinavia during the Viking Age, potentially as a result of changing policies following the Abbasid dynasty's accession in 751. Both these models, the local and the global narratives, depend on assumptions that require high-definition data, the nature of the site on one hand and the precise dating of its material flows on the other. As it stands, however, the transition from a market to a town is inferred from tentative evidence like clay layers and other features observed in narrow trenches, cautiously interpreted as signs of a more solid and permanent infrastructure. Some doubts have been raised as to whether any significant change can indeed be detected from the earlier organization of the site. So current excavations aim to provide more conclusive evidence by uncovering surfaces large enough to trace the spatial organization. In today's world, questions about the impact of globalizing resource networks and the dynamics and incentives driving the growth of commercial change are as relevant as ever. Ribe is a unique site where detailed archaeological research can offer insights for such discussions. If you know of similar examples, interesting old towns with a trading history, feel free to share your thoughts. I'm eager to see where this research leads. And if you're also fascinated by Viking history, be sure to subscribe for more content like this one. This was Irina. Take care and see you next time.